At 0900 hours on September 27, 1942, Lieutenant Colonel William Whailing stood at the perimeter of Henderson Field on Guadalcanal, observing 4 U.S. Marines carry a stretcher toward the field aid station. The victim was 22 years old on his third patrol of the week and had died before his unit even located the Japanese positions. 3 more stretchers followed in quick succession. That morning, the jungle had consumed a 7-man patrol. Only 4 returned alive. The Japanese dominated the jungle terrain. 2 months into the Guadalcanal campaign, Marine patrols stumbled into ambushes they never saw coming. 17 patrols had been completely annihilated in just 3 weeks. Japanese forces moved through the dense undergrowth like phantoms. Marines trained for head-on assaults couldn't spot an enemy soldier 10 feet away. Enemy snipers picked off officers with deadly precision, while machine gun nests remained hidden until entire squads passed by, then opened fire from behind. Whailing knew this pattern would lead to total defeat. The 1st Marine Division had lost 400 men to Japanese ambushes in September alone. Conventional infantry tactics were useless in jungle warfare. The Marines needed a new approach, something the Japanese wouldn't anticipate. 2 days earlier, Whailing had been relieved of his post as executive officer of the 5th Marine Regiment. It wasn't due to combat failure, but rather personality clashes with his commanding officer. Most officers in his situation would have been shipped back to the United States, but Colonel Gerald Thomas, the division's chief of staff, knew Whailing's reputation. A World War I veteran, Whailing had earned a Silver Star at San Miguel and was an expert marksman who'd competed in the 1924 Olympics. Most crucially, he understood fieldcraft better than any other officer in the division. Thomas kept him on Guadalcanal and tasked him with solving the jungle warfare crisis. Whailing spent 3 days watching patrols depart and counting how many came back. The math was grim. At this rate, the division would run out of infantrymen before the Japanese ran out of jungle to hide in. He needed men who could hunt the hunters, soldiers skilled in stalking, terrain reading, silent movement, and killing without being detected. On September 29th, Whailing walked into General Alexander Vandegrift's command tent with a proposal: form a scout sniper unit. He requested 100 volunteers, handpicked from Marines with hunting backgrounds, outdoor experience, and exceptional marksmanship. These men would be trained in reconnaissance and ambush tactics, then deployed in small teams to gather intelligence and eliminate Japanese positions before regular patrols advance. Vandegrift approved immediately. The general was familiar with Lieutenant Colonel Robert Rogers and his Ranger tactics from the French and Indian War. Small mobile units operating independently behind enemy lines. The concept perfectly matched their desperate situation on Guadalcanal. Whailing was given just 1 week to recruit his men and begin training. If you want to see how Whailing built the deadliest unit in the Pacific, hit that like button. It helps us share these forgotten stories with more people. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. Now back to Whailing. That night, he began poring over service records, searching for specific qualifications: expert rifle certification, rural upbringings, hunting experience, and disciplinary records that showed independence rather than cowardice. He wanted men who thought for themselves, Marines who sometimes got in trouble for questioning orders but always completed their missions. By October 1st, Whailing had identified 43 candidates. He summoned them to a briefing at 0600 on October 2nd, informing them the assignment was voluntary. He laid bare the risks. The casualty rate for reconnaissance work exceeded 50%. They'd operate in teams of 2 or 3, sometimes for days behind Japanese lines, and there would be no backup or extraction if things went wrong. 41 volunteered immediately, 2 walked away. Whailing looked at the men before him. Most were 20 years old or younger, and half had less than 2 months of combat experience. But they had something regular infantry didn't: a hunger to hunt. And Whailing was about to teach them how to become the most feared unit the Japanese would face in the Pacific War. His training program would become a blueprint. 2 years later, another Marine officer would adapt Whailing's methods to build an even more notorious unit, adding one unusual recruitment requirement that would shock the entire Marine Corps and create an 80-year legend. Training began on October 3rd. There were no manuals for what Whailing was creating. The Marine Corps had disbanded its scout sniper program after World War I. Everything he knew came from 24 years of service, jungle patrols in Nicaragua, and French battlefields where he'd learned that invisible soldiers survived longer than brave ones. The first lesson was silence. Whailing took his volunteers into the jungle west of Henderson Field and told them to walk 100 yards without making a sound. Every man failed. Equipment rattled, boots snapped branches, and canteens clinked against rifles. The jungle amplified every noise. He made them try again, removing anything that caused sound. Taping down metal parts, wrapping cloth around canteen hooks, and switching to soft-soled boots instead of standard-issue footwear. After 3 days, half the men could move through dense vegetation without alerting Japanese positions 200 yards away. Next came marksmanship. Most Marines could hit targets at 300 yards on a rifle range, but ranges didn't have wind, rain, or targets that shot back. Whailing taught them to estimate distance using terrain features, judge wind by watching vegetation, and account for how humidity affected bullet trajectory. He made them fire from uncomfortable positions, uphill, downhill, lying in mud, and crouch behind barely adequate cover. By October 10th, his top shooters could kill Japanese soldiers at 400 yards using iron sights. The hardest part was teaching them to think differently. Regular Marine infantry operated in 12-man squads with a clear chain of command. Orders flowed from officers, and initiative was discouraged. Whaling needed the opposite. Small teams operating independently for days, making tactical decisions without asking permission, and adapting when plans failed. He trained them in map reading and terrain analysis, how to identify ideal ambush spots, sketch enemy fortifications, and estimate troop strength from campfire smoke and foot traffic. Skills regular infantry never learned because officers handled that thinking for them. On October 13th, Whaling received orders from General Vandegrift. The division was planning an offensive across the Matanaka River, where Japanese forces had dug in on the western bank. Machine gun nests covered every approach, and artillery positions were hidden in the jungle canopy. Regular patrols had been slaughtered trying to locate these defenses. Vandegrift wanted Whaling's partially trained unit to find the Japanese positions before the offensive began. Whaling selected 8 men, splitting them into 4 teams. He assigned each team a sector to scout, ordering them to avoid contact if possible, gather intelligence, and return. If they were pinned down, they'd be on their own. No rescue missions, as the division couldn't afford to lose more men searching for missing scouts. The first team departed at 0400 on October 14th. 2 Marines, both from Montana who'd grown up hunting elk in mountain forests, moved west along the Matanaka River for 3 hours before discovering a Japanese artillery position at 0715. 4 Type 92 howitzers were hidden under camouflage netting, guarded by 60 soldiers. They sketched the position, counted ammunition crates, and returned by noon. The second team found a machine gun nest overlooking a river crossing. The third mapped Japanese patrol routes. The fourth ran into trouble. While mapping a trail network, the fourth team encountered a Japanese patrol, 5 soldiers 50 yards away. The 2 Marines froze, waiting for the patrol to pass. But one Japanese soldier stopped, looked directly at their hidden position in the vegetation, and raised his rifle. The Marine closest to him fired first, a single shot that dropped the enemy soldier. His 4 companions scattered and began shouting. Within 30 seconds, whistles echoed through the jungle as enemy troops converged on the sound. The 2 Marines ran east toward Marine lines, with Japanese soldiers in pursuit. The chase lasted 40 minutes, and they reached friendly positions with 11 enemy soldiers 200 yards behind them, still carrying critical intelligence. Whaling now had detailed maps of Japanese positions along a 2-mile front. Information regular patrols had failed to gather in 2 months of trying, at the cost of dozens of Marine lives. On October 15th, General Vandegrift reviewed the maps and immediately revised his offensive plan. Instead of a frontal assault, he would use the scout teams to guide flanking maneuvers around Japanese strongholds. Whaling's unit had proven the concept worked. Vandegrift wanted more. He ordered Whaling to expand the unit, recruit another 60 volunteers, form a full company, and prepare for the largest Marine offensive of the Guadalcanal campaign. The Battle of the Matanaka was approaching, and Whaling's scout snipers would lead the way into the deadliest jungle fighting the Pacific War had seen. The Matanaka offensive began at 0600 on October 16, 1942. Whaling scouts moved out 30 minutes before the main assault. Their mission was straightforward: infiltrate Japanese lines, locate command posts and artillery positions, eliminate officers and radio operators, and create chaos before Marine infantry crossed the river. Whaling organized his scouts into a special task force, combining them with the 3rd Battalion, 2nd Marines. The unit was officially called the Composite Battalion, but everyone else referred to it as the Whaling Group. They crossed the Matanaka River 3 miles upstream from Japanese positions, moving through jungles so dense that visibility was reduced to 20 feet. There were no trails or maps, only compass bearings and intuition. By 0800, they had penetrated 2 miles behind Japanese lines without being detected. The first engagement occurred at 0920. A Whaling Group scout team spotted a Japanese command post tent with radio equipment where 6 officers were studying maps, guarded by 15 soldiers. The scouts waited until the officers gathered for a briefing, then opened fire from 200 yards, killing 4 officers in the first volley. The remaining Japanese soldiers scattered into the jungle, never discovering who had attacked them. 30 minutes later, another scout team eliminated a forward observer who was calling artillery strikes on Marine positions. A single shot from 300 yards. The observer fell and the artillery fire stopped. Marine infantry advanced 600 yards before Japanese gunners realized their spotter was dead. By noon, the Whaling Group had encircled Japanese positions west of the Matanaka. Regular Marine battalions attacked from the east, while the scouts cut off retreat routes. Japanese forces were trapped between 2 fronts. No escape, no reinforcements. The fighting lasted 4 days. Between October 16th and 19th, approximately 750 Japanese soldiers died in the encirclement. The 4th Infantry Regiment was effectively destroyed as a combat unit. Marine casualties were lighter than in any previous offensive. 43 killed, 112 wounded. General Van de Griff credited the scout snipers with turning the tactical tide. Small teams gathering intelligence, eliminating key targets, and disrupting command and control. The Japanese had expected frontal assaults, not infiltration and ambush. Whaling's methods worked, but they came at a cost. On October 18th, Whaling was hit by shrapnel from a mortar round. The wound wasn't critical, but it landed him in a field hospital for observation. An infection set in 3 days later, and by October 25th, a high fever forced his evacuation to a hospital ship. He spent the next 4 months recovering, missing the rest of the Guadalcanal campaign, but his program survived. The 1st Marine Division formally established a scout sniper platoon in each infantry regiment, with a dedicated reconnaissance section in headquarters company. Training became standardized, and selection criteria were formalized. Everything Whaling had created from scratch in September was adopted as official Marine Corps doctrine by December. In February 1944, the division awarded him the Legion of Merit. The citation noted that he organized a scout sniper detachment and supervised training of selected groups in scouting, stalking, and ambush tactics, and that his instruction and expert knowledge of jungle warfare contributed immeasurably to success achieved by Marine patrols. Whaling never returned to Guadalcanal. He took command of the 1st Marine Regiment in Australia, led them at Cape Gloucester, and eventually commanded the 29th Marines on Okinawa, where he earned the Navy Cross. He retired as a Major General in 1954, but his true legacy wasn't in medals. It was in a concept, a template for how Marines could fight differently. His program became the foundation for all Marine scout sniper operations through World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. Every conflict where Marines needed eyes in places regular infantry couldn't reach. 2 years after Whaling created his program, another Marine officer read his after-action reports, studied his training methods, and decided to build something even more aggressive. An elite platoon that would take Whaling's ideas and add one controversial twist. This officer didn't want disciplined Marines. He wanted fighters, troublemakers, men who won brawls and ended up in the brig. He was about to create the most legendary scout sniper unit of the Pacific War. At 0700 on January 15, 1944, First Lieutenant Frank Tachsky walked through the brig at Marine Corps Base Camp Tarawa in Hawaii. A 29-year-old combat veteran of Guadalcanal and Tarawa, he was looking for the worst Marines in the 2nd Marine Division, and he found them. 18 men locked in cells for fighting, assault, insubordination, and destruction of property. The kind of disciplinary issues that usually led to dishonorable discharges. But Tachsky wasn't there to punish them. He was there to recruit them. 3 months earlier, Colonel James Risley had given Tachsky an unusual order: form an elite scout sniper platoon for the 6th Marine Regiment, modeled after British commandos. Train 40 men in reconnaissance and long-range killing, but don't recruit from regular infantry. Risley wanted something different: men who wouldn't blindly follow orders, who could think for themselves, and who would survive behind enemy lines where by-the-book tactics meant death. Tachsky understood the assignment. He'd read William Whaling's after-action reports from Guadalcanal and studied how small scout teams had disrupted Japanese operations. But Whaling had recruited hunters and outdoorsmen, disciplined men with fieldcraft skills. Tachsky wanted the opposite: fighters. His selection criteria were simple: find Marines who had won fights and ended up in the brig. Ignore the losers who'd been sent to the infirmary. He explained his logic to skeptical officers. When 2 Marines fought, one won and one lost. The loser went to the sick bay. The winner went to the brig for assault. Standard Marine justice punished the wrong man. The winner had proven he could handle himself, that he wouldn't quit when things turned violent. And that's the kind of Marine Tachsky wanted on his team. The brig commander thought he was insane, telling Tachsky these men were troublemakers, criminals, the worst disciplinary cases in the division. Tachsky replied that was exactly what he needed. Over 3 weeks, he interviewed 47 Marines with disciplinary records, asking them why they'd fought, what they'd done before joining the Corps, and whether they could kill a man silently with a knife. 23 volunteered, and another 17 came from regular infantry, Marines with expert marksman ratings who'd proven themselves at Tarawa. By February 1st, Tachsky had his 40 men, officially designated the Scout Sniper Platoon of the 6th Marine Regiment. The nickname came later, after they began stealing everything not bolted down on the Big Island of Hawaii. Training began in the jungle highlands near Hilo. Tachsky used Whaling's methods as a foundation: silent movement, long-range marksmanship, map reading, then added hand-to-hand combat training, knife fighting, garrote techniques, and how to kill sentries without making a sound. He adapted British commando tactics for Pacific jungle warfare. The platoon learned to live off the land, hunting wild boar, catching fish, and identifying edible plants, survival skills essential for operating behind enemy lines with no hope of resupply. They trained with piano wire garrotes, learning to coat the wire in glue and crush glass for deadlier effect. One Marine, nicknamed Wild Bill Emmer, became infamous for rescuing wounded men from kill zones using nothing but a garrote and silence. Equipment was a problem. The Marine Corps issued them World War I-era Springfield rifles, outdated rations, and no proper camouflage. So they stole better gear, raiding Army supply depots at night for newer weapons, canned food, and whiskey, even stealing an Army captain's Jeep and repainting it marine green. If you want to see how these 40 thieves earned their nickname on Saipan, hit that like button. Every like helps us share more forgotten stories. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. Now back to the thieves. Their stealing became legendary. Other Marine units called them the 40 Thieves, not as an insult, but as a sign of respect. These men operated outside normal military constraints, taking what they needed to survive. Officers looked the other way because Tachsky was building something unprecedented, a unit that could hunt Japanese soldiers in their own territory. By May 1944, the 40 Thieves were ready. Saipan was next, a 15-square-mile island of volcanic rock and jungle defended by 30,000 Japanese troops. It was the first invasion of Japanese home territory, and High Command expected 70% casualties in the first week. The Thieves would go in first, days before the main landing. Their mission was simple: scout enemy positions, map defenses, kill officers, and survive long enough to guide the assault force through the bloodiest invasion of the Pacific War. At 0530 on June 15, 1944, Corporal Bill Cannibal crouched in a Higgins boat 300 yards off Saipan's western shore. A 21-year-old member of the 40 Thieves, he watched as naval bombardment tore apart the beach ahead. The noise was deafening. 16-inch guns from battleships, 5-inch destroyer batteries, and rockets from landing craft. The entire shoreline disappeared under smoke and fire. But the Japanese were waiting anyway. The 2nd and 4th Marine Divisions hit the beach at 0840 with 8,000 Marines in the first wave. Japanese artillery opened fire immediately. Mortars, machine guns, and artillery zeroed in on the landing zones. Marines died before they could exit their boats. Bodies floated in the surf, and wounded men drowned in 3 feet of water. The 40 Thieves landed in the 4th wave with a mission distinct from regular infantry. While line companies fought for the beaches, Tachsky's platoon moved inland to find Japanese command posts, artillery positions, and supply dumps. Targets regular Marines wouldn't reach for days. By noon, the Thieves had penetrated half a mile inland, finding themselves in dense sugarcane fields where visibility dropped to 10 feet. Perfect terrain for ambushes. Japanese soldiers hid everywhere, in caves, underground bunkers, in spider holes covered with vegetation. The first silent kill happened at 1300 hours. 2 thieves were scouting a trail when they spotted a lone Japanese radio operator setting up antenna wire. They approached from behind and used a piano wire garrote. The operator died without a sound. They took his maps and radio codes, then hid his body in the sugarcane. 2 hours later, another team eliminated a 3-man observation post with knives. No gunfire. Japanese officers never realized their forward observers were dead, and their artillery fire became uncoordinated. Marines advanced through gaps in the defensive fire, exactly what Tachsky had trained them for. Silent killing, independent operation, and making tactical decisions without orders. The Thieves moved through Japanese-controlled territory like ghosts. Regular infantry fought set-piece battles. The Thieves hunted. On June 16th, Tachsky led a patrol to scout Mount Tipo Pale, a volcanic peak in central Saipan. Intelligence reports indicated the Japanese used the mountain as an observation post, with someone calling artillery strikes on Marine positions. Tachsky needed to find them. The patrol climbed through jungle so thick they had to use machetes, reaching the base of Mount Tipo Pale at 900. They found a trail leading up the slope, marked with fresh footprints and bicycle tracks. The Japanese were using bicycles to move supplies and troops down the mountain. Tachsky positioned his best snipers along the trail. 5 men with Springfield rifles fitted with inertial scopes, ordered to wait for targets. By noon, Japanese soldiers began descending on bicycles. Officers, couriers, and supply runners. They made easy targets. The Thieves killed 14 men that afternoon, never firing more than 1 shot per target, never giving away their position. The Japanese response was predictable. They sent a 40-man patrol to find the snipers. Tachsky pulled his men back before contact, melting into the jungle. The Japanese patrol found nothing but empty firing positions and dead bodies. That night, Tachsky received new orders. Division intelligence had located a Japanese ammunition depot near Guadalcanal, Saipan's capital city. Command wanted the Thieves to scout the depot, report on security, and destroy it if the opportunity arose. The mission was suicidal. Guadalcanal lay 2 miles behind Japanese lines with thousands of enemy soldiers between Marine positions and the city. There would be no support or backup. If things went wrong, the Thieves would be on their own. Tachsky selected 8 men, the best fighters in the platoon. He told them they'd leave at 0200 on June 17th, move through Japanese lines under cover of darkness, scout the depot, and return before dawn. He didn't tell them about the intelligence report he'd read that afternoon. Japanese commanders had ordered their troops to take no prisoners, use wounded Marines as bait for rescue parties, and prepare for a final banzai charge that would hurl every available soldier at Marine lines. The Thieves were walking into hell, and they wouldn't return as the same men who'd left. The 8-man patrol departed Marine lines at 0200 on June 17th. There was no moon, only complete darkness. They moved west through sugar-cane fields toward Guadalcanal, stopping every 50 yards to listen. The jungle on Saipan was never silent. Japanese patrols moved constantly, artillery rumbled in the distance, and wounded men screamed in no man's land between the lines. By 0330, they'd covered a mile, crossing 2 Japanese patrol routes without being detected. Sergeant Bill Knoppel led the way, navigating by feel and stopping whenever he sensed movement ahead. The rest of the patrol followed in single file, 10 feet apart, using only hand signals. They reached the outskirts of Guadalcanal at 0415. The city had been flattened by naval bombardment, buildings reduced to rubble, streets cratered, but infrastructure remained. The thieves could see Japanese soldiers moving through the ruins, along with supply trucks and communication lines. Despite the destruction, it was still a functioning military base. The ammunition depot sat on the northern edge of town, 3 concrete bunkers surrounded by barbed wire, with guards at each entrance. Tachsky counted 16 visible soldiers, probably more inside. His orders were to scout and report, not engage. But he saw an opportunity. The bunkers had ventilation shafts, narrow openings in the concrete large enough for a satchel charge. If they could plant explosives undetected, they could destroy the entire depot, eliminating tons of Japanese ammunition and silencing enemy artillery for days. He made his decision. 2 men would approach the nearest bunker and plant the charges. The rest would provide covering fire if things went wrong. They'd detonate at 0500, then race back to Marine lines before Japanese forces realized what had happened. Corporal Roscoe Mullins and Private Otto Hebel volunteered. Both had engineering experience and understood demolitions. They moved toward the bunker at 0430, crawling the last 100 yards over 20 minutes to reach the ventilation shaft. Japanese guards patrolled 30 feet away. Mullins waited until a guard turned his back, then lifted the satchel charge to the opening, wedged it inside, set the timer for 15 minutes, and slowly pulled back. They were 10 yards from the bunker when a guard spotted them. The Japanese soldier shouted and raised his rifle. Mullins fired first, dropping the guard, but the shout had alerted the entire depot. Whistles echoed through the ruins, and soldiers poured out of buildings. The thieves opened fire from 200 yards away, covering Mullins and Hebel as they ran. The satchel charge detonated at 0457, 3 minutes early. The explosion tore through the bunker, triggering secondary blasts as the ammunition inside ignited. Artillery shells, mortar rounds, and small arms fire. The entire depot chain reacted, with explosions continuing for 5 minutes. The sky turned orange and debris rained down across Guadalcanal. The thieves used the chaos to escape, running east through sugarcane fields while Japanese forces tried to contain the fires and evacuate remaining ammunition. By 0600, they'd crossed back into Marine lines. All 8 men, no casualties. They destroyed the largest ammunition depot in northern Saipan. Division intelligence estimated the explosion eliminated 30% of Japanese artillery ammunition. Enemy fire dropped significantly over the next 2 days, reducing Marine casualties and accelerating the advance. But the mission had consequences. Japanese commanders realized Marine scout units were operating behind their lines. They increased patrols, set ambushes, and began using wounded Marines as bait. Any Marine caught alone faced immediate execution. The rules of warfare on Saipan had changed after Guadalcanal. On June 19, a thief patrol walked into an ambush near Mount Tipopale. 4 men were scouting a trail network when Japanese soldiers, positioned in trees and underground, waited until the patrol was surrounded before opening fire. The patrol leader was killed instantly. The other 3 fought their way out, wounded, one with a bullet through the shoulder, another with shrapnel in his leg. They made it back to Marine lines with terrible news. The Japanese had used 2 wounded Marines as bait, leaving them crying for help in an open clearing. When the thief patrol approached, the ambush was triggered, and the wounded Marines died in the crossfire. That night, the 40 thieves held an unofficial meeting. No officers, just enlisted men. They voted unanimously, no thief would be taken alive. If wounded and unable to escape, their comrades would ensure a quick death rather than capture and torture. The war on Saipan had become personal. By June 23rd, the 40 thieves had been in continuous combat for 8 days. No rest, no rotation off the line. They operated in 12-hour shifts, half the platoon scouting during the day, the other half infiltrating Japanese positions at night. Sleep came in 2-hour intervals, and food was whatever they could steal or scavenge. Casualties mounted. The platoon had started with 40 men, and by June 23rd, only 32 remained combat effective. 3 dead, 5 wounded, severely enough for evacuation. The math was stark. At this rate, the platoon would cease to exist by July 1st. But they kept hunting. On June 24th, a 4-man team scouted Japanese positions in the Cagman Peninsula, discovering a battalion command post in a cave system. 20 officers, radio equipment, and maps showing defensive positions across northern Saipan. The team couldn't assault the cave, too many guards, so they marked the position and called in artillery. Naval gunfire destroyed the cave at 1600 hours, a direct hit with 14-inch shells. The entire command structure of a Japanese battalion was wiped out in one strike, collapsing enemy coordination. Marines advanced 300 yards that afternoon with minimal resistance. The next day brought the worst loss the Thieves would suffer. Corporal Martin Dyer led a 5-man patrol into dense jungle near Mount Tapachau, tasked with scouting reported Japanese artillery positions. They found the artillery, 4 Type 92 guns positioned in a narrow ravine, camouflaged with vegetation and completely hidden from aerial reconnaissance. Dyer's patrol observed the position for 30 minutes, counting crew members and noting ammunition storage locations, before beginning their withdrawal. They were 200 yards from the artillery position when Japanese infantry appeared from 3 directions. The ambush was perfect. Machine guns opened fire from elevated positions, rifles from ground level. The patrol was trapped in the kill zone with no cover. Dyer ordered his men to scatter and run for Marine lines, staying behind with a Browning automatic rifle to provide covering fire. 3 men escaped. Dyer and 1 other Marine did not. The Marine who'd stayed with Dyer was later found dead from multiple gunshot wounds. Dyer's body was never recovered. Japanese forces had overrun the position before Marines could retrieve the remains. The patrol survivors reported that Dyer had killed at least 7 Japanese soldiers before being overwhelmed. For his actions, Dyer was posthumously awarded the Navy Cross. The citation read that he sacrificed himself to ensure his patrol's survival, and that his leadership and courage were in keeping with the highest traditions of the Marine Corps. The Thieves took Dyer's death hard. He'd been popular, a good leader who never asked anyone to do something he wouldn't do himself. His loss reminded everyone that skill and training only delayed the inevitable on Saipan. Eventually, the numbers caught up. June 26th brought news that changed the tactical situation. Japanese forces were preparing for a massive banzai charge. Intelligence estimated 3,000 soldiers would launch a suicidal assault on Marine positions. Command wanted the Thieves to infiltrate Japanese assembly areas, locate officers, and eliminate them before the attack began. Tachsky received the orders at 2200 on June 26th. The banzai charge would likely happen within 48 hours. He had one night to disrupt Japanese preparations. His mission? Take 20 Thieves deep behind enemy lines, find command posts, kill as many officers as possible, and create chaos before the assault. It was the most dangerous mission the platoon had ever received. Japanese forces were consolidating, with thousands of soldiers moving into attack positions. Security would be intense. The Thieves would be operating in an area saturated with enemy troops, and extraction would be nearly impossible if things went wrong. Tachsky briefed his men at 2300, laying out the odds and warning that casualties would be high. He asked for volunteers, and all 20 stepped forward. Not out of recklessness, but because they understood the stakes. A coordinated banzai charge would hit Marine lines with overwhelming force, killing thousands, unless someone disrupted the Japanese preparations first. The Thieves would go. They would hunt officers in the darkness, and they would probably not all return. The 20 Thieves departed at midnight on June 27th. There was no moon, only heavy cloud cover, perfect conditions for infiltration. They split into 5 teams of 4, each assigned a sector, each knowing they'd be on their own if contact was made. Tachsky led the central team, moving west through Japanese lines toward reported command post locations. By 0200, they'd penetrated a mile into enemy territory, finding Japanese soldiers everywhere, sleeping in foxholes, standing guard, moving supplies, thousands preparing for the assault. The first officer died at 0230, a Japanese captain studying maps by lamplight inside a captured American tent. Tachsky's team approached within 50 yards, firing a single shot from a suppressed Springfield. The captain fell forward onto his maps. The guards never heard the shot. Over the next 3 hours, the 5 thief teams eliminated 17 Japanese officers, majors, captains, lieutenants, the command structure for the Banzai charge. Each kill was silent, each team extracting without detection. By 0530, all 20 thieves had returned to Marine lines, 0 casualties. The Banzai charge began at 0400 on July 7th. 3,000 Japanese soldiers screamed as they advanced with fixed bayonets, hitting Marine positions along a 2-mile front. The assault was ferocious. Hand-to-hand combat, Marines fighting with rifles, pistols, knives, entrenching tools, anything that could kill. But the Japanese attack lacked coordination. The officers who should have directed the assault were dead, units attacked without support, and communication broke down. What should have been an organized offensive devolved into a chaotic charge. Marines held their positions, with artillery and machine gun fire cutting down wave after wave of Japanese soldiers. By 0800, the Banzai charge had failed. The Japanese lost 2,500 men, and the Marine line held. The Battle of Saipan effectively ended that morning. Organized Japanese resistance collapsed, and remaining enemy forces retreated to caves to prepare for final stands. The 40 thieves had done their job. Their nighttime raids had disrupted Japanese command, turning a potentially devastating coordinated assault into a suicidal charge that accomplished nothing. The platoon finished the Saipan campaign with 27 men, 13 casualties over 21 days of combat, 4 dead, 9 wounded. The survivors returned to Hawaii in August, and the platoon was disbanded in October. The men were reassigned to regular infantry units. The Marine Corps decided specialized scout sniper platoons were too costly in casualties, but their legacy endured. Frank Tachsky received the Silver Star, and his methods influenced Marine reconnaissance doctrine for the rest of the war. The concept of small teams operating independently behind enemy lines became standard practice. What William Whailing created on Guadalcanal, the 40 thieves perfected on Saipan. Modern Marine scout snipers trace their lineage directly to these men. Whaling's training methods, Tachsky's selection criteria, the fieldcraft, the silent killing, the independence. Every Marine sniper who served after 1942 learned from lessons forged in jungle combat on Pacific Islands. The Scout Sniper military occupational specialty was retired in December 2023 after 81 years, but its legacy lives on, in reconnaissance platoons, in tactics manuals, and in stories passed down through generations of Marines who learned that sometimes the deadliest warriors are the ones you can't see. If this story moved you as it moved us, do us a favor. Hit that like button. Every like tells YouTube to show this story to more people. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We're rescuing forgotten stories from dusty archives every day. Stories of Marines who saved lives with fieldcraft and courage. Real people. Real heroism. Drop a comment right now and tell us where you're watching from. Are you in the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia? Our community spans the entire world. You're not just a viewer, you're part of keeping these memories alive. Tell us your location. Tell us if someone in your family served. Just let us know you're here. Thank you for watching, and thank you for ensuring that William Whailing and the 40 Thieves don't fade into silence. These men deserve to be remembered, and you're helping make that happen.